The female resentment demon was an amphibious creature. After sucking 3 people dry underwater, it was itching to climb the banks and search for new targets. Luo Binghe's expression was icily severe. He snapped his fingers, igniting a burst of flames at his fingertips. Then, boosting the flames with spiritual energy, he flicked them towards the lurking demonic beast. As soon as they touched the beast's hair-like strands, the flames flared into an inferno, forcing the black mass of hair to retreat into the water with all speed, leaving it afraid to come back to the bank. Luo Binghe executed this set of actions in a single smooth sequence, radiating formidable might, utterly relentless. Shen Qingqiu internally held up a sign. 10 points to Luo Binghe! Luo Binghe picked up the night pearl that Qin Wanyue had dropped during her panic and raised it high. Like a shining beacon, it calmed everyone's hearts. "Don't stray! Stay together!" he shouted. Then he took out a piece of standard equipment all the participants had been given, a rescue firework, and fired it into the sky. The rescue fireworks were given to disciples to call for help if they encountered a monster that they were unable to handle. The Immortal Alliance Conference hadn't released any excessively dangerous monsters, and if a participant fired a rescue firework 3 times, they automatically forfeited their right to participate. Therefore, in all past conferences, no one had really used the fireworks unless they were really backed into a corner. However, at that moment, glittering bursts of fireworks rose one after another in the sky over Juedi Gorge. This should have been a beautiful scene, but at that moment, not only did these fireworks not seem gorgeous, they made the onlookers' insides turn and twist in fear. Every blossoming firework represented a disciple who had encountered an exceedingly dreadful monster, whose life was in danger. "The crystal mirrors! Look at the crystal mirrors!" someone observing cried. Blood-curdling shrieks and wails of distress came in an unending stream from the mirrors. Some disciples were already corpses on the ground. Some were still struggling, soaked with blood, gazes full of terror. "Why? Why here? There shouldn't be." "Someone, help! Shifu, save me! Shige, save me! Sect brother, save!" A hoarse cry burst from one mirror, followed by the mournful shriek of a spirit eagle. The picture went out, becoming a flat, black screen. Everyone stared, uncomprehending. "What's going on?" That hoarse cry had definitely been the cry of a demon realm bone eagle, a type of aerial demonic beast that was as fierce as it was bloodthirsty. It had no doubt torn apart the spirit eagle, shattering its crystal into dust. Beasts that swarm in the water, beasts that walked on land, beasts that flew through the air. These fierce demonic entities had absolutely not been a part of the conference's plan. Though Shen Qingqiu had mentally prepared for this long ago, as he watched the all-encompassing scene of chaos play out before him, his scalp went numb and his fingers chilled. He realized that he would be unable to do as he expected. He couldn't just pretend he was watching the climax of an ultra-realistic show. Outside Juedi Gorge, pandemonium had broken out on the dais. Tianyi Temple's cultivators said sternly, "What is happening? The demonic beasts chosen for the Immortal Alliance Conference were determined via strict rules and meticulous selection. How could something like the female resentment demon, which resides only in the demon realm, find its way in?" Many Huanhua Palace disciples had already died, and the old palace master shot to his feet. "Open the barrier!" The giant barrier over Juedi Gorge was supported by nearly 100 monks from Zhaohua Monastery. The Zhaohua Monastery abbot immediately began to cast a long-distance voice transferal spell to tell the monks to release the barrier. "You cannot," Yue Qingyuan said. The old palace master started. "Sect leader Yue, what is the meaning of this?" Over 100 Changqiu Mountain disciples were also in Juedi Gorge. Yet, Yue Qingyuan refused to open the barrier to let the trapped escape. Obviously, he had an exceptional reason. Shen Qinqiu had long since figured it out. He responded in Yue Qingyuan's place. Once you release the barrier, the disciples will be able to escape, but so will the demonic beasts trapped within, and they will scatter. There are villages only a few kilometers from here. The situation would become even more grave. Sect members and disciples at least have the ability to contend with the beasts, but the common people with no spiritual energy at all. No elder or sect leader on the platform had the words to retort, and they fell into a dead silence. At this time, no matter how great one's cultivation, core formation, or nascent soul stage, or anything in between, there was no way to reverse the course of events. If we cannot open the barrier to let them out, then what should we do? Asked a cultivator at a loss. Well, if they can't leave, then we must enter, said Liu Qingge. The members of Changqiu Mountain exchanged a look in tacit agreement. Fellow cultivators, Yue Qingyuan said gravely, someone must be behind today's incident. They hope to use these demonic beasts to wipe out the new talent of the cultivation world, eliminating its future pillars in one fell swoop. For now, we can only maintain the barrier. But are any of our fellow cultivators willing to enter the gorge with Changqiu Mountain sect to clear out the demonic beasts and rescue the participating disciples? To carve a path of the blood into the gorge, clearing out all the demonic beasts, would require not only martial power, but a great deal of courage. The old palace master was the first to respond. It would dishonor Huanghua Palace to refuse. Huanghua Palace sent the most participants to this year's conference and had invested the most as well. They were the party least able to take the loss. Once someone took the lead, others followed, volunteering one after another. Even if there were a scant few cowards in the crowd, by now they had been reminded that their own precious talented disciples were also trapped. Shen Qinqiu stepped forward, ready to stand with a group volunteering to provide assistance, when Liu Qingge also stepped forward slightly and used his sword sheath to block Shen Qinqiu's way. Expression unchanging, Shen Qinqiu pushed the sheath aside with 2 fingers. What is the meaning of this? You're poisoned, duh, Liu Qingge said succinctly. That's right, Yue Qingyuan agreed. Your ailment from without a cure has yet to be resolved. Entrust the safety of Qingjing Peak's disciples to us. If Shen Qinqiu's condition suddenly acted up after he entered Juedi Gorge, and his spiritual energy stalled while he was surrounded by swarms of demonic beasts, then neither heaven nor earth would be able to save him. Shen Qinqiu shook his head. How can a master hide and relax on the dais when his disciples are in danger? If I can't even protect my own disciples, I don't deserve to be the peak lord of Qingjing Peak. Also, you gotta remember, he was a vital character who needed to trigger a crucial point. If he wasn't on the scene, they couldn't keep filming, you know. Ding! System notification. Making the villain more 3D by crafting an honorable image. B points plus 30. Shen Qinqiu internally rolled his eyes. Are you handing me a piece of candy before you stab me? Yue Qingyuan had failed to dissuade him, as had everyone else. Then you must be careful, he said reluctantly. If you can't manage it, you must use a voice transferal spell to call us for help. Shen Qinqiu wasn't so pessimistic about his ability to handle demonic beasts. His confidence in his own cultivation and spiritual power aside, his interests in the demonic beasts of proud immortal demon way had far surpassed his interest in all those flavors of women. He might not have remembered where any given female protagonist liked to go stargazing with Luo Binghe after being slighted, and of course sometimes he was unable to match names to characters, but he definitely remembered every demonic beast's attributes and weaknesses with exacting clarity. His knowledge of the plot aside, if you had to call something Shen Qinqiu's golden finger, it could only be this. In Juedi Gorge, Luo Binghe had just calmed a crowd of terror-stricken junior disciples. In this sort of situation, they couldn't afford to fall into disarray. If they encountered a new demonic beast, or any of them strayed off, the situation would only grow more disastrous. The night wind whipped by, carrying wails and howls from all around. It was impossible to tell if they came from human or demonic throats. The faint-hearted were already curled up and sobbing, and Qin Wanyue's face was deathly pale. But at the sight of Luo Binghe leaning against a tree, his Zhenyang sword, clasped hilt up within his crossed arms, calm yet alert, protecting them against any attacks that came from the darkness, she couldn't stop the trace of tender fondness welling up within her. If Shen Qingqiu were there, he would have grown incredibly excited, his gossiping monologue on fire. "Girl, you've fallen for him." Suddenly, rustling noises came from the nearby shrubbery. Luo Binghe's gaze sharpened, and he gathered spiritual energy in his palm, ready to strike. The rustling in the bush grew louder and louder, closer and closer. Everyone's hearts climbed into their throats. Perhaps they were terrified beyond belief, because not a single one let out a scream. Suddenly, there was a plop, like someone had collapsed to the ground. A round object rolled out of the bushes. It was a human head. Both of the head's eyes were tightly closed, its face covered in blood, its head shriveled like a chicken's nest. Normally, this sight would have been frightening, but at present, a harmless corpse head was much better than a man-eating demonic beast's, so quite a few disciples even sighed in relief. Does anyone know which sect this martial brother belonged to?" Qin Wanyue asked, her voice trembling. Disciples from the various sects stepped closer to check, one after another, but all of them sighed in relief. "Not one of ours. Never seen him before." Luo Binghe gazed into the dark depths of the shrubbery, thinking, if the head was here, the body was also nearby. It would be better to go check its sect uniform. He strengthened the spiritual flow in his palm and walked into the dark. As expected, a stiff corpse lay beyond the shrubbery, wearing aqua-blue cultivator robes. One of Tianyi Temple's newly accepted disciples. Luo Binghe saw only the hem of his robes before sighing. Newly accepted disciples like this one only came to the Immortal Alliance conference to gain experience. They had never imagined that they would be drawn into such an unpredictable catastrophe and lose their lives. He looked further up and suddenly froze in shock. There was still a perfectly good head on top of the corpse's neck. Then where had the other head come from? Zheng Yang's sword had already left its sheath before Luo Binghe doubled back. As its white light overflowed, he yelled, "Get away from the head!" Before he finished speaking, the head lying quietly askew on the ground suddenly opened its eyelids. It met the disciples' gazes with wide glowing eyes, then 8 spider legs, segmented and barbed, stretched forth from somewhere at the bottom of its neck, and it leapt up in a single bound. The closest person couldn't dodge in time, and the monster jumped onto the disciple's head. With a crazed howl, the disciple drew his sword and widely swung it around, forcing everyone nearby to hurriedly duck away. Luo Binghe dared not to attack carelessly in case he stabbed the disciple's head instead of the monster. The result would be too terrible to imagine. The sensation of something so terrifying crawling back and forth on your head would be enough to frighten anyone to death. In complete despair, the disciple changed the direction of his sword and swung it towards his own head. Before he could strike, those 8 spider legs had found their target and ferociously speared into his temples. He went instantly stiff, and like his tongue had twisted into knots, he was unable to yell a single word. The spider's legs sticking into the human head bore deeper and deeper, and the disciple's whole body began to twitch unceasingly. After only a moment, the 8 legs drew back out, leaving nothing but twin rows of gory holes in his temples. Everything within his skull had been sucked clean, leaving it completely empty. The scene was utterly horrible. Even Luo Binghe remained frozen for a while, unable to act. Having eaten its fill of brains, the human-headed spider monster crawled up and down the corpse, letting out a mournful scream like an infant's wail. Just then, an arrow of light made of pure spiritual energy flew through the night and pierced its still howling mouth, skewering a hole clean through it. Amidst the sudden silence and everyone's dazed stares, Shen Qingqiu rubbed his sore ears, slowly shook out his sleeves, and with a snap of his fan, murmured, "How noisy."